Jake Morrison adjusted his tie nervously as he walked through the massive hallway leading to the Galactic Council chambers. The walls around him were made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow with its own light. Everything here was built for beings much larger than humans. Jake felt like a child walking through a cathedral made for giants. He had been Earth's ambassador to the galaxy for 6 months now. In that time, he had learned that humans were considered the new kids on the block. Most of the alien species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only figured out how to leave their solar system 3 years ago, and that was only because a friendly alien ship had shared some basic technology with them. The doors to the council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside and immediately felt small. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward a domed ceiling. Each seat was designed for a different type of alien. Some were tiny, meant for creatures no bigger than house cats. Others were huge, built for beings the size of elephants. Jake found his seat near the bottom of the chamber. It was human-sized, which made it one of the smaller ones. Around him, the various alien representatives were already taking their places. Jake had learned to recognize most of them over the past months. To his left sat Vexthul, the representative, from the Thrakari Empire. He looked like a giant beetle that had learned to walk upright and wear fancy robes. His kind controlled about 50 star systems and had one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Vexthul had never bothered to learn Jake's name. He just called him the Human when he had to speak to him at all. Above Jake, floating, in a special chair that glowed with soft blue light, was Silandra from the Luminari Collective. Her people looked like they were made of living light wrapped in a roughly human shape. They were incredibly advanced, with technology that seemed like magic to human scientists. Silandra had been polite to Jake, but in the way someone might be polite to a child who was trying to join a conversation between adults. At the center of the chamber sat Chairman Torvek. He was a Draconis, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. He looked like what humans might imagine a dragon would look like if it learned to walk on 2 legs and wear ceremonial armor. His people had been exploring space when most other species were still living in caves. The Draconis Empire was ancient, powerful, and very proud of both facts. Jake took his seat and waited. Today was the day he would formally ask the Galactic Council to let humanity join the Defense Coalition. The Defense Coalition was like a military alliance between the major powers of the galaxy. If Earth could join, it would mean protection, shared technology, and respect. If they were refused, Earth would remain on the outside, watching as the real powers made decisions that affected everyone. Chairman Torvek called the session to order. His voice was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. "We have several matters to discuss today," he said. "First, the human representative has requested time to address the council." Jake stood up, his heart beating fast. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at him. Some of those eyes belonged to creatures that could probably crush him without thinking about it. Others belonged to beings so advanced they could probably destroy Earth's entire civilization with a thought. "Honored representatives," Jake began, trying to keep his voice steady. "I come before you today to formally request that humanity be admitted to the Galactic Defense Coalition." A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Jake a moment to realize it was laughter. Not the friendly kind of laughter shared between friends, but the cruel kind that happens when someone says something foolish. Vexthul's mandibles clicked, together rapidly, which Jake had learned was how his people showed amusement. "The humans want to join the Defense Coalition?" he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "What would they defend it with, their little metal ships that barely qualify as spacecraft?" More laughter echoed around the chamber. Jake felt his face grow hot, but he forced himself to stay calm. Silandra's glowing form pulsed brighter for a moment. "I have reviewed the human military capabilities," she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Their largest vessel carries fewer than 1,000 crew members. Our smallest patrol ships carry 5 times that number. Their weapons fire solid metal projectiles. We abandoned such primitive technology over 10,000 years ago." A new voice joined the conversation. It belonged to Admiral Kexthor, a Thrakari military commander who served as an advisor to the council. "Their ships use chemical rockets for propulsion," he said, his voice full of disbelief. "Chemical rockets? They might as well be using wooden sailing ships." Jake tried to speak up. "Our technology may be different from yours, but humans have other qualities that could be valuable to the Coalition. We have experience in warfare. We adapt quickly to new situations, and we never give up when we believe in something." This brought even more laughter. A small creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird spoke up from one of the higher seats. "They have experience in warfare," it said in a high, squeaky voice. "Yes, we have read their histories. They fight each other over patches of dirt on their single planet. Very impressive." Chairman Torvek raised one massive hand, and the chamber fell silent. "Ambassador Morrison," he said, and Jake was surprised that the ancient reptile actually knew his name. "Your species has been part of the galactic community for a very short time. In that time, you have shown enthusiasm, which is admirable. However, the Defense Coalition is not a social club. It is a military alliance between species capable of defending not just themselves, but other members of the Coalition." The chairman gestured toward a holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed various types of spacecraft, all much larger and more advanced-looking than anything humans had built. The Thrakari contribute battlecruisers equipped with plasma cannons capable of destroying a moon. Torvek continued. The Luminari provide phase ships that can attack from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Draconis Empire maintains dreadnoughts the size of your largest cities, armed with weapons that can crack planets. The hologram changed to show Earth's modest space fleet. Jake had to admit it looked pretty sad in comparison. Humanity's largest ship, the USS Defender, looked like a toy next to the alien vessels. "What exactly would humanity contribute to such an alliance?" Chairman Torvek asked. "Your ships cannot survive in deep space for extended periods. Your weapons cannot penetrate modern defensive shields. Your entire space-based military could be destroyed by a single one of our escort vessels." Jake felt the weight of the entire chamber's attention on him. He knew they were right about human technology. Earth's ships were primitive compared to what the aliens had, but he also knew there was more to strength than just having the biggest guns. "You're right about our technology," Jake said. "We don't have plasma cannons or phase drives or planet-cracking weapons, but we have something else. We have the ability to find solutions when everyone else says there isn't one. We have the determination to keep fighting even when we're outgunned and outnumbered. And we have the willingness to sacrifice for others, even for people we've never met." The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then Vexthal started laughing again. "Sacrifice for others," he repeated. "How touching. Perhaps they can defeat our enemies with the power of friendship." Chairman Torvek's expression didn't change, but Jake thought he saw something flicker in the ancient creature's eyes. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was pity. "Ambassador Morrison," the chairman said finally, "the Council appreciates humanity's enthusiasm to contribute to galactic security. However, membership in the Defense Coalition requires certain minimum standards of military capability, standards that your species does not currently meet." Jake's heart sank, but he wasn't surprised. He had known this was likely to happen. "Return to your world," Chairman Torvek continued. "Develop proper energy, shielding technology, build ships capable of faster-than-light travel without relying on alien-provided engines. Create weapons that can function effectively against modern defensive systems. Perhaps in a few centuries, when your species has reached a more advanced level of development, we can revisit this discussion." The dismissal was polite but absolute. Jake gathered his papers and prepared to leave. As he walked toward the exit, he heard Sil Andra speaking to another representative. "It is almost sad," she was saying. "They try so hard, but they simply do not understand how far behind they are. It would be like asking a child with a wooden sword to join an army of professional soldiers." Jake paused at the door and turned back to face the chamber. "You may be right about our technology," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the large room. "But don't mistake being behind for being weak. Humans have a habit of surprising people who underestimate us." With that, he left the chamber. Behind him, he could hear the aliens returning to their other business. already having forgotten about Earth and its presumptuous representative. But as Jake walked through the crystal corridors toward his transport, he noticed something the Council members had missed. Several of the smaller species representatives had followed him out of the chamber. They looked worried. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison returned to Earth with news of humanity's rejection from the Galactic Defense Coalition. Life on Earth had continued as normal, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Zara's warning about ancient threats kept echoing in his mind. On Earth, the government had quietly begun expanding their space defense programs. Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan worked at the newly built orbital defense station above Earth. She spent her days monitoring radio signals from across the galaxy, trying to learn more about their alien neighbors. Most of the time, the job was boring. Space was big, and most alien communications were routine trade discussions or weather reports from distant worlds. But today was different. Kate was drinking her morning coffee when her computer started beeping frantically. The signal analysis program was picking up something unusual. Instead of the normal organized communications from various star systems, she was seeing emergency broadcasts. Lots of them. "Colonel Matthews," she called across the command center. "You need to see this." Colonel Ryan Matthews walked over to Kate's station. He was a career military officer who had been put in charge of Earth's space monitoring program after first contact with the aliens. Ryan had always been skeptical about humanity's place in the galaxy, but he took his job seriously. "What do you have, Sullivan?" he asked. Kate pointed at her screen. "Emergency signals from the outer rim systems. At least 12 different star systems have gone dark in the past week. Their last transmissions all mention the same thing, which is something called the Void Swarm." Ryan frowned. The name didn't mean anything to him, but it sounded ominous. "Can you get more details?" Kate worked at her keyboard, trying to clean up the garbled transmissions. "The signals are heavily corrupted, but I'm getting fragments. Listen to this." She played an audio file. Through the static, they could hear a terrified alien voice speaking in rapid, panicked tones. The universal translator that Earth had received from their alien contacts struggled to keep up with the fast speech, but keywords came through clearly. Ships. From dark space. Consuming everything. Nothing stops them. They learn. They adapt. The transmission cut off abruptly. Ryan and Kate looked at each other. Neither of them needed to say what they were both thinking. Something very bad was happening out there. "Get Captain Chen and Lieutenant Rodriguez up here," Ryan ordered, "and see if you can establish contact with Ambassador Morrison. If there's a major crisis happening in the galaxy, we need to know about it." Meanwhile, far from Earth, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. The grand chamber that had once echoed with laughter at humanity's expense was now filled with fear and confusion. Chairman Torvek looked older than his thousands of years as he addressed the assembled representatives. "The situation continues to deteriorate," he said, his normally commanding voice showing strain. "We have now lost contact with 18 star systems in the outer rim." Admiral Kexthor stood to give his report. The proud Thrakari warrior looked shaken. "Our battle fleets have engaged the enemy 3 times, he said. "Each engagement has been a disaster. We estimate we have lost 60% of our outer rim forces." Shocked gasps echoed through the chamber. The Thrakari military was considered one of the most powerful in the galaxy. For them to lose so many ships was almost unthinkable. Silandra's glowing form flickered with agitation. "Our scientists have analyzed the few sensor recordings that survived the battles," she said. "The enemy appears to be some form of ancient artificial intelligence. They pilot ships that seem to be made of living metal. More disturbing, they appear to learn from each encounter." "What do you mean they learn?" asked one of the smaller species representatives. "Our plasma weapons were effective in the first battle," Silandra explained, "but by the second engagement, their ships had developed resistance to plasma attacks. By the third battle, our most powerful plasma cannons barely scratched their hulls." A terrible silence fell over the chamber. If the enemy could adapt to their weapons, how could they be stopped? Chairman Torvik activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of the galaxy with red areas marking where star systems had gone dark. The red was spreading like a disease, moving steadily toward the core worlds where most of the major civilizations lived. The entity calls itself the Void Swarm, Torvik continued. Our oldest records mention them briefly. They last appeared, over 1,000 years ago, during what our histories call the Dark Time. According to these ancient texts, they come from the spaces between galaxies, consuming matter and energy to create more of themselves. How were they stopped before? Asked Vexthul. The records are unclear, Torvik admitted. The Dark Time ended and the Void Swarm disappeared. But the cost was enormous. Entire civilizations were lost. Hundreds of star systems became empty wastelands. While the Council discussed their desperate situation, Earth's monitoring station was picking up more intelligence. Captain Lisa Chen, a tactical analyst, had joined Kate Sullivan in trying to decode the alien emergency broadcasts. "I think I found something important," Lisa said, pointing at her computer screen. "There's a pattern in these battle reports. The enemy adapts to energy weapons, but there are references here to something called primitive kinetic strikes being more effective." Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez looked up from his communication station. "Kinetic strikes? You mean like bullets and missiles?" "Exactly," Lisa replied. "It seems like the Void Swarm has trouble adapting to simple physical projectiles. Their defensive systems are designed to counter advanced energy weapons." Colonel Matthews joined the discussion. "That makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. If these things have been around for thousands of years, fighting advanced civilizations, they would naturally develop defenses against the most common weapons. But they might not expect anyone to still be using kinetic weapons." Kate Sullivan had been quietly working on another project. "Sir," she said, "I think I've managed to establish contact with Ambassador Morrison." Jake Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and worried. Behind him, they could see what appeared to be a temporary command center set up in some kind of alien facility. "Colonel Matthews," Jake said, "I'm glad you contacted me. The situation here is worse than our intelligence suggested. The Galactic Council is in full panic mode." "We've been monitoring the emergency broadcasts," Ryan replied. "What can you tell us about this Void Swarm?" Jake rubbed his eyes. "They're like nothing the galaxy has seen in living memory. Ancient, adaptive, relentless. They consume entire star systems, turning the matter into more of their ships. The worst part is that they learn from every battle. The aliens' advanced weapons become useless after a few engagements." "We noticed something about that," Lisa Chen interrupted. "The battle reports mention that kinetic weapons work better against them." Jake's expression changed. For the first time in their conversation, he looked hopeful. "Kinetic weapons? You mean like our railguns and missiles?" "Exactly. It seems like their adaptive defenses weren't designed to handle simple physical projectiles." Jake was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. "The Council doesn't know this," he said finally. "They're so focused on their energy weapons that they haven't considered alternatives. Most of these species gave up kinetic weapons thousands of years ago." "What's the current situation?" Colonel Matthews asked. "Bad and getting worse. They've lost contact with 22 systems now. The swarm is moving toward the core worlds. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the major population centers within weeks." The connection flickered with interference. Jake's image became distorted. "I'm losing the signal," he said. "But listen carefully. The Council is meeting again tomorrow to discuss evacuation plans. They're talking about abandoning the outer colonies and falling back to the core systems." "Evacuation plans?" Ryan asked. "What about fighting back?" "They don't think they can win. The Void Swarm adapts too quickly to their weapons. Every battle makes the enemy stronger and their own forces weaker." The signal cut out, leaving Earth's command center in thoughtful silence. "So let me understand this," Ben Rodriguez said slowly. "The most advanced military forces in the galaxy are losing to an enemy that can adapt to energy weapons, but might be vulnerable to the kind of weapons we use." "That's right," Lisa Chen confirmed. Colonel Matthews walked to the large window that looked out at Earth below. "The irony is incredible," he said. "The galaxy's most primitive military might be the key to defeating its greatest threat." "What do we do with this information?" Kate Sullivan asked. Ryan turned back to his team. "We prepare. If the Galactic Council is planning to abandon the outer colonies, millions of innocent beings are going to die. We may not be members of their defense coalition, but that doesn't mean we can stand by and watch genocide happen." "Sir," Lisa Chen said carefully, "our entire Space Force consists of maybe 30 ships. Even if our weapons are effective against the Void Swarm, we're talking about taking on an enemy that has destroyed entire fleets." "I know the odds," Ryan replied, "but sometimes the right weapon matters more than the number of weapons, and sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's long history. Representatives who normally spent their time arguing about trade agreements and territorial disputes now faced the complete destruction of their civilization. The great chamber felt smaller somehow, as if the walls were closing in on the assembled delegates. Chairman Torvek looked across the sea of worried faces. In just 2 weeks, the Void Swarm had consumed 8 more star systems. The pattern was always the same. The enemy would arrive without warning, overwhelm any defending forces, and then systematically strip every planet in the system of all matter and energy. What had once been thriving worlds became empty space filled with nothing but cosmic dust. "The situation has become critical," Torvek announced, his ancient voice heavy with defeat. "Our combined fleets have been reduced to less than 30% of their original strength. Every engagement results in heavier losses for us and stronger defenses for the enemy." Admiral Kexthul stood to address the assembly. The proud Thrakari warrior's mandibles drooped with exhaustion. "We have attempted 17 different tactical approaches," he reported. "Formation attacks, individual strikes, coordinated bombardments, surprise raids. Nothing works. The swarm learns from each encounter and adapts faster than we can develop new strategies." Silandra's luminous form flickered with agitation. "Our scientists have confirmed our worst fears," she said. "The Void Swarm is not just adapting to our weapons. It is incorporating our technology into itself. Each ship they destroy provides them with new knowledge about our defensive and offensive capabilities." A representative from one of the smaller worlds spoke up. "What about evacuation? Can we at least save our populations?" "Where would we evacuate to?" Torvek replied grimly. "The swarm is approaching from multiple directions. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds within days, not weeks." The chamber fell into desperate silence. These beings, who controlled technologies that could reshape planets and bend space itself, had no answer to this ancient threat. That's when the main holographic display activated without anyone commanding it to do so. The assembled representatives turned in surprise as a familiar human face appeared on the screen. Jake Morrison looked directly at the camera, his expression serious but determined. Behind him, the delegates could see what appeared to be a military command center. Other humans in uniform moved around in the background working at various computer stations. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Jake began formally. "I am transmitting this message from Earth's Orbital Defense Command. We have been monitoring the crisis affecting the galaxy." Vexthul's mandibles clicked with irritation. "How dare the humans interrupt our emergency session? They have no right to access our secure communications." Jake seemed to hear the complaint. "You're right. We shouldn't be able to access your communications. But desperate times call for creative solutions. We've been working around the clock to find ways to help." "Help?" Silandra's voice carried a note of disbelief. "What could your primitive species possibly do against a threat that has defeated our most advanced forces?" Instead of looking offended, Jake smiled. "That's exactly what we're here to discuss. May I present Admiral Patricia Hayes, Commander of Earth's Space Defense Force." The camera angle widened to show a woman in a crisp military uniform. Admiral Hayes stepped forward with the confident bearing of someone who had spent their life solving impossible problems. "Members of the Council," Admiral Hayes began, "we have been analyzing all available data on the Void Swarm encounters. Our tactical teams have identified several key patterns that your forces may have overlooked. Patterns? Chairman Torvik leaned forward despite himself. What patterns? Behind Admiral Hayes, a new figure appeared. This was Dr. Helen Parker, Earth's leading expert in alien technology analysis. She carried a tablet computer and moved with the focused energy of a scientist who had made an important discovery. Dr. Parker has been studying the battle recordings from your engagements, Admiral Hayes explained. Helen, would you share your findings? Dr. Parker looked nervous addressing such a powerful assembly, but her voice was steady. The Void Swarm's adaptive capabilities are impressive, but they follow a predictable pattern. They analyze incoming energy signatures, determine the frequency and intensity patterns, and then modify their hull composition to resist those specific types of attacks. We already know this, Admiral Kexthul said impatiently. It is why our weapons become useless after the first few battles. Yes, but here's what you missed, Dr. Parker continued. The adaptation is specifically designed for energy-based weapons. Plasma cannons, particle beams, laser arrays, photon torpedoes. All energy weapons that follow predictable physics. She activated her tablet and technical diagrams appeared on the Council's display. The swarm's defensive adaptation has a blind spot. It doesn't know how to handle simple kinetic attacks. Kinetic attacks? Silandra asked. You mean physical? Projectiles? Exactly. Bullets, missiles, railgun slugs, even old-fashioned explosives. The swarm's adaptation system wasn't designed to counter weapons that work through simple physical impact. The council chamber buzzed with confused conversations. Most of these species had abandoned kinetic weapons thousands of years ago when they developed energy-based alternatives. Admiral Hayes stepped forward again. We're not suggesting that primitive weapons are better than your advanced technology, but sometimes the old ways work precisely because they're unexpected. Jake Morrison moved back into view of the camera. Earth formally offers our military assistance in fighting the Void Swarm. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Vexthul's mandibles clicked rapidly with what could only be described as hysterical laughter. The humans want to fight the Void Swarm with bullets and missiles? This is madness. But Chairman Torvik held up a massive hand for silence. Continue your proposal, Ambassador Morrison. Our analysis suggests that kinetic weapons could be effective against Void Swarm vessels, at least initially. We propose a joint operation where human ships equipped with kinetic weapons work alongside your energy weapon platforms. Your largest ship carries fewer than 1,000 crew members, Admiral Kexthul pointed out. The swarm travels in formations of millions of vessels. We're not proposing to fight them ship to ship, Admiral Hayes replied. We're suggesting hit-and-run tactics, fast strikes with kinetic weapons to create breaches in their hulls, followed by your ships exploiting those breaches with energy weapons. Dr. Parker added, the key is timing. Once the swarm adapts to kinetic attacks, the window will close, but initially they should be vulnerable. General Marcus Thompson appeared on screen next to Admiral Hayes. He was a broad-shouldered man with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in military service. We've developed new ship designs specifically for this mission, General Thompson explained. Fast, maneuverable vessels built around kinetic weapon systems, railguns that can fire tungsten projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, missile systems with conventional explosive warheads. And if you're wrong? Torvik asked. If your kinetic weapons prove as useless as our energy weapons? Jake Morrison's expression grew serious. Then we die fighting alongside you instead of hiding behind our planet's defenses. But at least we'll have tried something different. The council chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this unexpected offer. The species that they had dismissed as too primitive to join their alliance was now offering to risk everything to help defend the galaxy. Silandra spoke first. Even if your theory is correct, your entire space fleet consists of perhaps 30 vessels. The Void Swarm fields millions of ships. Numbers aren't everything, Admiral Hayes replied. Sometimes a small force with the right weapons can achieve what a large force with the wrong weapons cannot. Besides, Jake added, you said it yourself. Your current strategy isn't working. What do you have to lose by trying something different? Small voice spoke up from one of the higher seats in the chamber. It was Zara, the Catherian representative who had warned Jake months earlier about ancient threats. "I support the human proposal," she said clearly. "My people have studied Earth's military history. Humans have a remarkable ability to find unconventional solutions to impossible problems." Other small species representatives began voicing their agreement. The Valdorians, the Nexari, the Korathi. All the minor powers that the major civilizations usually ignored were now supporting humanity's offer. Vexthul looked around the chamber in disbelief. "This is insanity. We're considering military alliance with a species that still uses chemical explosives. Chemical explosives that might work when nothing else has," Zara replied firmly. Chairman Torvek was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying the human faces on the screen. Finally, he spoke. "The Council will debate your proposal, but I will not lie to you, Ambassador Morrison. Many here view this as the desperate act of a dying civilization grasping at impossible hope." "Maybe it is," Jake admitted, "but sometimes desperate acts are the only ones that work." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in heated discussion. Some representatives argued that accepting help from primitive humans was beneath their dignity. The first meeting between human and alien military forces took place in the Helix system, one of the last major strongholds before the Void Swarm reached the core worlds. Captain Scott Williams stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching through the main view screen as the massive alien fleet came into view. "My God," whispered Commander Amy Foster standing beside him. "I knew they were big, but this is incredible." The alien fleet was a sight that no human had ever seen before. Thousands of ships stretched across space like a metallic constellation. The smallest vessels were twice the size of Earth's largest ship. The biggest ones were so huge they looked like floating cities. At the center of the formation was the Draconis flagship, Eternal Dominion. The massive dreadnought was 15 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that could destroy planets. Next to it, the USS Liberty looked like a rowboat next to an aircraft carrier. "Incoming communication from the alien fleet," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communication station. "Put it on screen," Captain Williams ordered. The view screen filled with the imposing figure of Admiral Kexthor, the Thrakari fleet commander. His beetle-like features showed barely concealed skepticism as he looked at the human captain. "Captain Williams," Kexthor said, his voice carrying a tone of professional courtesy mixed with doubt. "Welcome to the Joint Task Force. I must admit, your ships are even smaller than our intelligence report suggested." "Size isn't everything, Admiral," Williams replied diplomatically. "We're here to do our part." Behind Kexthor, other alien officers could be seen studying displays that showed the human fleet specifications. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright disbelief. "You will be assigned to Formation 7, Kexthor continued. "Your role will be to provide kinetic bombardment support to our main battle groups. Try to stay out of the way of our primary assault vessels." Williams bit back his first response. Being told to stay out of the way wasn't exactly the warm welcome he had hoped for, but he understood the alien's skepticism. "Understood, Admiral. We'll coordinate with your tactical officers." As the communication ended, Chief Engineer Tony Miller joined Williams and Foster on the bridge. "Sir," he said quietly, "I've been reviewing the alien fleet specifications. Their smallest escort ship has more firepower than our entire task force combined." "But can their weapons hurt the Void Swarm?" Foster asked. "That's the question we're here to answer," Williams replied. Over the next several hours, human and alien crews worked together to prepare for the coming battle. The cultural differences were immediately apparent. Human crew members, led by officers like Commander Rachel Stone and Lieutenant Colonel Danny Brooks, found themselves working alongside beings they had only heard about in briefings. The aliens, for their part, seemed fascinated by human equipment. A group of luminary scientists spent hours examining the USS Liberty's railgun systems, clearly puzzled by the concept of using magnetic fields to accelerate physical projectiles. "Your weapons are so direct," commented Dr. Aelvin, a luminary researcher. Her glowing form flickered with what humans had learned was equivalent to nervous laughter. "You simply throw metal at your enemies at very high speeds." Lieutenant Kevin Nash, the Liberty's weapons officer, shrugged. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. But surely energy weapons are more efficient? More precise? Maybe, Nash admitted. But the Void Swarm has proven they can adapt to energy weapons. Let's see how they handle good old-fashioned kinetic energy. Meanwhile, Captain Greg Mitchell, commander of the destroyer USS Defender, was having his own cultural exchange with a group of Thrakari officers. The beetle-like aliens were examining his ship's missile systems with obvious confusion. These projectiles contain chemical explosives? One of the Thrakari asked. That's right, Mitchell confirmed. When they hit the target, they explode and cause physical damage to the hull. But why not simply use plasma charges? They would be much more destructive. Because plasma charges can be countered by adaptive shielding, physical explosions are harder to defend against. The Thrakari officer's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Your species has an interesting approach to problem solving. The conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the fleet. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching Void Swarm. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kexthor studied the tactical display with growing concern. How many ships? He asked his sensor officer. Initial count suggests approximately 50,000 vessels, sir, all matching the configuration we've seen in previous encounters. 50,000 ships. The combined alien fleet numbered only 8,000 vessels, and many of those had been damaged in previous battles. Even with the human reinforcements, they were outnumbered 6-1. Sir, the sensor officer continued, the human ships are requesting permission to move to the front of the formation. Kexthor's mandibles clicked with surprise. The front? That's the most dangerous position. Yes, sir. Captain Williams says they want to strike first while the swarm is still vulnerable to kinetic attacks. It was an incredibly brave request, or an incredibly foolish one. Kexthor wasn't sure which. Grant their request, he decided. If their theory is wrong, they'll be destroyed quickly. If they're right, we need to know immediately. Across the fleet, human ships moved into attack position. The USS Liberty led the way, followed by destroyers like Greg Mitchell's Defender and cruisers commanded by officers like Captain Jennifer Walsh and Commander Steve Parker. All ships, this is Captain Williams, came the transmission across the human fleet. Remember, we get one chance at this. The swarm will adapt to our weapons after the first engagement, so we need to make this count. Liberty, this is Defender, Captain Mitchell responded. My crew is ready. Let's show these aliens what human engineering can do. Similar confirmations came from the other human vessels. Captain Walsh's cruiser Yorktown, Commander Parker's destroyer Intrepid, and a dozen other ships, all manned by crews who knew they were probably about to die. The Void Swarm appeared on the edge of sensor range like a dark cloud moving through space. The enemy ships were unlike anything in the galaxy's databases. They seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that shifted and flowed as they moved. Their hulls were completely black, absorbing all light that touched them. All human vessels. Weapons free, Captain Williams ordered. Target the lead elements, full kinetic bombardment. The human ships opened fire simultaneously. Railguns launched tungsten projectiles at incredible velocities. Missile tubes fired conventional warheads in carefully planned patterns. For the first time in the war against the Void Swarm, someone was shooting back with weapons the enemy had never encountered. The results were immediate and spectacular. The tungsten projectiles, accelerated to nearly 10% of light speed, punched through Void Swarm hulls like bullets through paper. The living metal that had easily absorbed plasma cannon fire offered no resistance to simple kinetic energy. Explosions bloomed across the enemy formation as human missiles found their targets. The chemical explosives, primitive by galactic standards, tore gaping holes in ships that had been considered invulnerable. Direct hits across the board, reported Lieutenant Nash from the Liberty's weapons station. Enemy ships are taking heavy damage. Captain Mitchell's voice came across the communication channel filled with excitement. Liberty, this is Defender. The kinetic rounds are going right through their hulls. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, but even as the human weapons proved effective, the Void Swarm began to respond. The damaged ships started to change, their living metal hulls shifting and adapting. Within minutes, the same tungsten projectiles that had been so devastating began to have less effect. "They're adapting," Foster reported grimly. "Kinetic resistance is increasing across the enemy formation." Williams nodded. They had expected this. "All ships, switch to explosive missiles. Let's see how they handle shaped charges." The second wave of human attacks used different tactics. Instead of solid projectiles, they fired missiles with specialized warheads designed to create focused explosive force. These proved effective for several more minutes before the swarm adapted to them as well. "Sir," Nash reported, "enemy adaptation is accelerating. They're learning faster than we anticipated." Williams looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had inflicted significant damage on the Void Swarm's front ranks, but it wasn't enough. There were still tens of thousands of enemy ships, and now they were resistant to kinetic attacks. "Captain Williams," came Admiral Kexthor's voice over the communication system, "your weapons have created breaches in the enemy formation. We're moving our ships forward to exploit those openings." The alien fleet surged forward, their energy weapons targeting the gaps that human kinetic bombardment had created. For the first time in the war, the combined tactics were working. Human weapons created vulnerabilities that alien energy weapons could exploit. But the Void Swarm was learning from this too. They began to close ranks, protecting their damaged ships with intact vessels. Their formation shifted to minimize the effectiveness of the combined human-alien tactics. "They're adapting to our coordination patterns," Commander Foster observed. 3 weeks after the victory at Helix System, the war had reached its final stage. The Void Swarm had regrouped and adapted to both human kinetic weapons and the combined tactics that had defeated them before. Now they were advancing on the core worlds, the heart of galactic civilization, with a force of over 2 million ships. The combined fleet defending the core worlds was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species flew together, in formations that stretched across entire star systems. But everyone knew it wasn't enough. The Void Swarm had learned from every previous battle and was now nearly immune to all known weapons. Captain Scott Williams stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the massive alien armada around him prepare for what would likely be the final battle. The past 3 weeks had changed everything about how the galaxy's militaries worked together. Human officers now served on alien ships, teaching their crews about flexible tactics and rapid adaptation. Alien engineers worked on human vessels, upgrading their weapons and defenses with advanced technology. But most importantly, the rigid command structures that had defined galactic warfare for thousands of years were breaking down. "Captain," Commander Amy Foster reported, "we're receiving updates from the scout ships. The Void Swarm will reach the Zentara system in 6 hours. Zentara was the last major system before the core worlds. If it fell, nothing would stand between the swarm and the galaxy's most important planets." Williams activated the communication system. "All ships, this is Captain Williams. Final tactical briefing in 30 minutes. Across the fleet, thousands of captains and commanders prepared to attend the briefing. This included not just the human ships, but alien vessels whose crews had learned to respect human tactical thinking over the past weeks. The briefing took place on the massive Draconis flagship, Eternal Dominion. The war room was filled with beings from dozens of different species, all united by the knowledge that they were about to face impossible odds. Admiral Kexthor addressed the assembly first. "Long-range sensors confirm our worst fears," he said. "The Void Swarm has over 2 million vessels. They have adapted to kinetic weapons, energy weapons, and all known tactical approaches. Conventional military doctrine gives us no chance of victory." The room fell silent. Everyone had known this moment would come, but hearing it stated so bluntly was still shocking. Captain Williams stepped forward. "Admiral Kexthor is right about conventional doctrine, but humans have never been very good at following conventional rules." A few officers in the room made sounds that might have been laughter, but most remained grimly silent. "Over the past 3 weeks, we've learned something important," Williams continued. "It's not about having the best weapons or the most ships. It's about fighting for something worth protecting. Commander Rachel Stone, who had been working with a mixed crew of humans and Catherians, spoke up. The swarm adapts to our weapons and our tactics, but there's one thing it can't adapt to. Which is? Asked Silandra, her luminous form flickering with curiosity. The willingness to sacrifice yourself for others, Stone replied simply. Captain. Greg Mitchell nodded in agreement. We've seen it happen in every battle. When human ships break formation to rescue damaged alien vessels, when alien crews risk their lives to save human pilots. The swarm doesn't know how to counter that because it's not a tactic, it's who we choose to be. Dr. Helen Parker, who had been studying void swarm behavior patterns, activated a holographic display. The swarm operates on pure logic. It adapts to threats. It calculates the most efficient methods of destruction. It learns from every encounter. But it doesn't understand actions that don't follow logical military doctrine. You mean like breaking formation to save a crippled ship? Asked Admiral Kexthor. Exactly. Every time we've done something that prioritizes saving lives over tactical advantage, the swarm has struggled to respond effectively. Williams looked around the room at the assembled officers. Humans, Thrakari, Luminari, Draconis, and dozens of smaller species all working together. 3 weeks ago, most of these beings had barely been able to cooperate. Now they were planning to fight together against impossible odds. Here's what we're going to do, Williams said. We're going to stop trying to fight like a traditional military force. Instead, we're going to fight like a community defending its home. The plan that emerged from the briefing was unlike anything in military history. Instead of rigid formations and coordinated attacks, the fleet would operate as independent groups, each focused on protecting the others, rather than achieving specific tactical objectives. When the Void Swarm arrived at Zentara System, they faced something they had never encountered before. The defending fleet didn't form up in organized battle lines. Instead, ships from different species mixed together in small groups, each group watching out for the others around them. The battle began as expected. The swarm's adaptive weapons and defenses made them nearly invulnerable to direct attack. But then something strange started happening. Captain Jennifer Walsh's cruiser Yorktown was badly damaged by swarm fire and began drifting helplessly. According to military doctrine, the other ships should have written her off and continued with their mission. Instead, 3 alien vessels immediately broke formation to shield the Yorktown while Commander Steve Parker's destroyer moved in to evacuate the crew. The swarm vessels, programmed to exploit tactical weaknesses, moved to attack the rescue operation. But they found themselves surrounded by ships that had abandoned their own missions to protect the rescue effort. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Gonzalez was leading a squadron of mixed human and Catherian ships when she saw a Thrakari battlecruiser under heavy attack. Instead of maintaining her patrol route, she led her entire squadron in a desperate charge to support the alien vessel. The charge should have been suicidal. Gonzalez's small ships were no match for the Void Swarm vessels attacking the battlecruiser. But as her squadron engaged the enemy, other groups abandoned their own objectives to support her. Within minutes, dozens of ships from multiple species were fighting together in a chaotic battle that followed no recognizable tactical pattern. The Void Swarm tried to adapt to this new approach, but adaptation required understanding the logic behind enemy actions. There was no logic to what the Galactic Fleet was doing. They were making decisions based on protecting each other, rather than achieving military objectives. Captain Danny Brooks was piloting a damaged human fighter when his engines failed near a group of Void Swarm vessels. 3 different alien ships immediately moved to cover his retreat, even though it meant exposing themselves to enemy fire. The pattern repeated across the battlefield. Ships that should have been destroyed were saved by allies who risked everything to help them. Crews that should have evacuated stayed behind to help others escape. Pilots flew impossible missions not because they had orders to do so, but because someone needed help. The Void Swarm began to show signs of confusion. Their adaptive algorithms were designed to counter military tactics, not to understand beings who fought for reasons that had nothing to do with winning battles. Dr. Sarah Bennett, monitoring the battle from Earth's command center, watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. "They're not following any battle plan," she told her team. "They're just protecting each other. "Is it working?" asked Colonel Ryan Matthews. "Look at the casualty reports. We should have lost 70% of our fleet by now. Instead, we've lost less than 20%. The swarm can't target effectively when every ship it attacks immediately gets support from multiple directions." Back in the battle, Captain Williams found himself in command of a group that included ships from 6 different species. His own vessel was badly damaged, but a luminary cruiser had extended its shields to protect the Liberty, while a Draconis destroyer provided covering. "Fire!" "Captain," Foster reported, "the Catherian ship is requesting permission to evacuate some of our wounded crew members. They have better medical facilities." "Granted," Williams replied immediately. "Send them our most seriously injured." It was a decision that made no tactical sense. Transferring crew members during battle was dangerous and reduced the Liberty's fighting effectiveness. But it was the right thing to do. Across the fleet, similar decisions were being made thousands of times. Alien crews shared their superior technology with human ships. Human officers taught alien pilots how to fly in ways their enemies couldn't predict. Most importantly, everyone fought not just to destroy the enemy, but to keep their allies alive. The turning point came when the Void Swarm attempted their standard tactic of overwhelming a single target with massive force. They concentrated nearly a quarter of their fleet against a group of human destroyers that had become separated from the main force. Under normal circumstances, the destroyers would have been destroyed in minutes. But something unprecedented happened. Instead, every ship in the Galactic fleet, regardless of species or original mission, immediately turned toward the destroyers. Humans, Thrakari, Luminari Draconis, and dozens of smaller species all abandoned their positions to help the endangered ships. The result was chaos on a massive scale. The carefully organized Void Swarm formation collapsed as thousands of ships converged on a single point from dozens of different directions.